name's William Tucker, and I moved here with my family in 1956. I think it was October of '56. We moved from southwest Georgia to northeast Georgia. My parents were working with Coates and Clark, and we moved here. I lived right here on Railroad Street, just a couple of blocks from here to the museum. But I was 12 years old. The biggest thing going for me with Toccoa was it was the year that Paul Anderson won the Olympics. You know, it was a big thing for me, about 12 years old, to know that I was moving to the town of the world's strongest man. Got to be about 14 years old and went to work at Finley Walker Station over on Currahee Street. And just lived right around the corner from Finley Walker Station. But I used to pump gas when Paul Anderson would come in his Cadillac to get gas. So I knew of him just to sight, to see him, but was able to pump gas for him too. You know, back then you check the oil, check the windshields, wash the windshields, but he was always very courteous to me as a kid, you know, to take care of his needs when he came to the station. So, sixth grade here, went from the sixth grade at Toccoa High School and Toccoa Elementary. Graduated in 1962 from Toccoa High School. After high school, I had a friend that his name was Larry Poole. He decided that we needed to join the Navy. So we joined the Navy, and on the buddy plan, you could join with somebody else as a buddy, and you would be guaranteed to stay together through boot camp. And then when we joined also, the Atlanta airport was getting started really in a big way of commercial transportation. And the Navy was selling the idea we can get you into the Airedale program of the Navy, and you come back and get you a job at Atlanta with the airport. So both Larry and I went in the Airedale program. He studied to be an aircraft mechanic, engine mechanic, and I went into airframes. We called us tin benders as a nickname for our rate, for my rate. And then both of us spent about 3 years in the Navy. He went to station in Florida, and I went to Atsugi, Japan. So I spent most of my Navy career, about 2 years in the Far East, then came back to Toccoa. When I came back too, I had been working in a hardware store, Dixie Hardware, there at the overhead bridge on Pond Street. And he had told me, when I get out of the Navy, he says, come back, and he says, I'll give you a job. Well, I came back. He didn't have a job for me. He had hired several Core Falls students to work there at the hardware store. So he says, go down and see Mr. Mack at Belk's. He says, he'll give you a job. Well, I went down, sure enough, Mr. Mack helped. He hired me right off. I had the sales experience of working about 2 or 3 years in the hardware store. And so I worked at Belk's for a while. So Belk's was a major business downtown of Toccoa. After I had worked at Belk's about a year, really when I got back home in 1965, my mother became sick. And rather than go back in the Navy, I was needing to get a job that I could stay here in Toccoa. So I had a great uncle that worked for the telephone company in Florida, and he advised me. He says, you need to go to all the utilities. So I went to the city, Toccoa, went to the power company, Georgia Power, went to the telephone office, put in my applications, all one morning. And I went into the telephone office and saw the secretary there and went in and said, like, apply for a job. And she says, how tall are you? And I said, 5'8". She says, how much you weigh? And I says, 150 pounds. She says, you got to be 5'9" and weigh 160. I said, well, give me an application. I said, I might grow some. So she gave me the application. I filled it out, gave it back to her. She turned it in. And about 2 o'clock, I had a telephone call. We did have a telephone. You know, first telephone we'd ever had was in '56. But we had a telephone. Well, I got a call, and it said, would you come back in and take the test, just part of the application. So I went back in and took their test, and on the test, the two questions that I really remember they were, which way is an airplane flying and which way is it turning with the wings up or down, left or right. So, simple question like that. Another one was, when the cat's away, the mice will play, true or false? Wow. The answer is true. So, who would attempt to say false? But anyway, I answered that true. Then I was working with a telephone company, but while I was working with Belts, before we went there, I was selling shoes. And the operators used to work split shifts, and so they would come downtown to Belts, do their shopping, or have a dead time between shifts, and try on shoes, try on clothes, just do shopping. And sometimes to see us boys that worked in there. So a lot of students from School Falls, so it was a meeting place too. But my wife came in, and she would shop for shoes, just try on shoes, never buy anything. So finally, after several months of this, she came in and she bought a pair of shoes and wrote a check for it. So she wrote me a check for $3 for the shoes with her telephone number on it. So that's how we met. And we got married in 1967. So that was the start of my telephone career as well as my family life. We had 2 boys and 1 girl in a span of 3 decades. Coal Falls is really a historical happening that happened in Stephens County that most anybody would experience. But we were having some guests over that were students at the Coal Falls at the time, living on Railroad Street. And the lights went out. It was a rainy night, just rough weather. And we ended up hanging a Coleman lantern in the walkway between our kitchen and dining room to finish dinner. They left early, and like I say, it was raining real hard, just bad stormy night. Went to bed, and the next morning I woke up and everything's just real quiet. And you could hear sirens. I got inquisitive enough to get in my truck and drive down toward Falls Road. They wouldn't let me go down Falls Road. So I walked down the hill, found 1 telephone man and 1 supervisor on a pole down near the creek. And realized, they need some more help. So I came back to my truck, get in my truck, go get my telephone truck, and I had to drive all the way around by Currahee Mountain, come in from the northern side of Coal Falls, and drove my truck on, and I was the first telephone repairman on the campus. Got to surveying what we might could look at and do to get some cable so they could have some communications on the campus. But the road that goes right by the creek, you couldn't even drive on it. It had like about 2 feet of mud on it. I made it back out the high part of the road, but we decided that there was not anything we could do to get communications on the campus soon enough. So they moved the communications center to the telephone office. Knowing some of the people that attended Coal Falls, but not a lot of the students. But it was just an outpouring of seeing people out there too that were just right after that flood. You could see students sitting on the parts of the flooring that was just washed away, searching for their friends. But then the people in Toccoa, I think, responded well too, to understand and opened up churches for clothing, for food, and that type of thing for those who had lost their homes and just didn't have any other place to go on campus. So it was a community experience of being able to help people and help them get by too. So. Yes, I was in Stephens County, and at the time, I was active through the American Legion and just being active in the community, and I was selected to carry the torch. It was an honor to be selected to carry the torch, and interesting things about it, you were told, to be prepared to be able to run a certain distance, to be physically able and everything. So you get out and you practice. I had a steel brick that went with a grinding machine, and so I would run around holding the brick up, and jog some, and really jog, to be able to meet their specs. Well, when the Olympics came along, it was quite an experience. It hits you too when you go to that bus and gather, and they hand you that torch and you actually touch it. Quite an emotional experience. So my torch was carried from Tacoma Motel to the stage that was placed in front of the city hall, and was placed on a stand there. So I stood there on the stage with all of the other speakers and all the other activities going on during the whole ceremony. So I was fortunate to be a part of that. When you're running and the people are crowded on you, motorcycles are pushing people back, they're that close. When I turned the corner on Doyle Street to come in front of the courthouse and the old Harper store, it was like somebody had made 2 or 3 touchdowns at a football game. The roar of the crowd was just tremendous. I had a substitute runner who had worked with the recreation department here. You were told, to pass it off, let him run with the torch on. So we did that, and he was a part of being able to share the experience with somebody else here in Tacoma, as well as the other 9 people who were selected to run different sections of the torch through Tacoma. It was quite an occasion.